Life is not always fair, and sometimes it tests us before we are even old enough to understand what pain really means. My story begins when I was just a little boy, only 6 years old, when my father left this world. He was taken away too soon in a tragic accident, and in that single moment, my entire life changed. I didn't fully understand what death was at that time. I only knew that the man who used to carry me on his shoulders, the man who made me laugh with his silly jokes, the man who kissed me goodnight, was gone forever. I kept waiting for him to come back, but he never did. From that day forward, my mother became my entire world. She was strong, but I could see the weight she carried in her tired eyes. She started working double shifts at a small diner in town, just to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. Many nights I stayed up waiting for her, but she would come home long after midnight, exhausted, her hands trembling from carrying plates and scrubbing tables. She would sit on the couch and almost fall asleep instantly. I was just a child, but I would pull a blanket over her and whisper to myself that one day I would make things better for her. School was not kind to me. Other children came to class with brand new clothes, shiny shoes, and colorful backpacks. I walked in with hand-me-downs in a second-hand bag my mother had found at a thrift store. Some of the kids laughed, some pointed fingers, and I pretended not to care. But deep inside, every word hurt me more than I could ever admit. Still, even through the pain, I carried something that no one could take away from me: a dream. I remember the first time I saw a doctor in a white coat when my mother took me to a hospital. His presence, his calmness, the respect people gave him, it all filled my heart with hope. I whispered to myself that day, one day I will be like him. Every night while my mother slept after her long shifts, I sat under the dim light of a small lamp on the kitchen table, reading old textbooks, struggling to stay awake but refusing to stop. That flickering light became my closest friend. When I turned 14, I realized that dreams alone would not keep us alive. Bills were piling up, and rent was always overdue. My mother was doing everything she could, but it wasn't enough. I decided to help. I got my first part-time job at a grocery store, stacking shelves and mopping floors. My school days were followed by long nights at work, and sometimes I didn't get home until midnight. I was tired, my body ached, but when I saw my mother's proud smile, it gave me strength. I still remember one snowy night when she asked me softly, "Why do you work so hard, my son?" I looked at her and replied, "Because one day I will buy you a house where you won't have to work anymore." Those words became a promise I carried in my heart. High school was the real battlefield. Many of my friends started giving up on studies. Some fell into the wrong crowd, chasing quick thrills, wasting their time. But I held on to my dream like a lifeline. Some teachers noticed my determination. One old science teacher looked at me one day and said, "You have something special inside you. Don't ever waste it." That single sentence became fuel for me. I started applying for scholarships. I entered science fairs and I pushed myself beyond limits. But none of that changed the fact that survival was still hard. After school, I worked as a dishwasher at a busy restaurant. My hands were red and burned from hot water. My back ached from carrying heavy trays, but I never stopped whispering to myself, "Doctor, doctor, one day." That dream was the reason I woke up every morning and the reason I went to sleep with tired eyes but a hopeful heart. When I turned 18, I applied to several colleges. I prayed every night asking for a chance. When the acceptance letter from a state university finally arrived, it felt like a miracle. My mother and I cried together, holding the letter as if it were the key to our future. It wasn't a full scholarship, but it was enough to give me hope. I hugged my mother tightly and promised her that I would make her proud and that I would make my father proud too. Walking into college for the first time was overwhelming. Students drove expensive cars, wore designer clothes, and carried the latest gadgets. I walked across the campus with my second-hand shoes and borrowed books. The gap between me and them felt enormous, but I refused to let it crush me. While other students went to parties and enjoyed their freedom, I worked long hours as a waiter in a diner near campus. I wiped tables, carried heavy trays, refilled coffee, and smiled at strangers, even when I was dying inside from exhaustion. Then after my shift, I went back to my dorm room and studied until the sun came up. My life was a constant war between exhaustion and ambition, but I knew this was the price of the dream. There were times when I doubted myself. There were nights when I thought I couldn't go on any longer. But every time those thoughts came, I saw my mother's tired hands in my mind, and I remembered the promise I made to her. That memory was enough to push me through the pain. Years passed, and I became stronger, more determined, and hungrier for success. And then came the moment I had been waiting for, the acceptance letter to medical school. It was the most emotional day of my life. My mother cried again, holding the letter as if it were gold. She whispered, "Your father would be so proud." Hearing those words gave me more strength than anything else ever could. The first day of medical school felt like standing at the edge of a mountain. The journey ahead looked impossible, but my heart was filled with fire. I knew this was the beginning of the life I had been dreaming of since I was a little boy. Classes were tough, the books were thicker than anything I had ever seen, and the hours of study were endless. Some nights I barely slept for 2 or 3 hours. My eyes burned, my head pounded, but I never let myself quit. Every page I read, every lecture I listened to, was a step closer to my dream. But life has its way of testing us even when we think we're finally on the right path. My mother's health began to decline during my second year of medical school. The years of endless work and stress had finally taken their toll on her. I remember rushing home after classes, sometimes traveling overnight just to take care of her. I cooked meals, gave her medicine, and sat beside her bed, holding her hand as she slept. Many times I cried silently, terrified of losing the only person who had ever believed in me. But she always smiled and told me, "Don't stop studying, my son. You have to become what you promised me." Her strength gave me courage. To pay for her medical bills and my education, I worked even harder. I took night shifts at a hospital as an orderly. I cleaned rooms, changed sheets, and carried equipment for doctors who often didn't even notice me. But every time I saw a doctor walking confidently through the halls, helping patients, I imagined myself in that white coat. I whispered to myself, "One day, that will be me." That thought alone gave me enough strength to keep going. There were moments when I almost gave up. Once I failed an important exam. I felt like the world was collapsing. I locked myself in my tiny dorm room and cried, thinking maybe I wasn't smart enough, maybe I wasn't meant for this. But then I remembered the promise I made to my mother, the words I had spoken when I was 14. "One day, I will buy you a house where you won't have to work anymore." That promise didn't allow me to quit. I picked myself up, studied harder than ever, and passed the exam the second time. It wasn't easy, but it proved to me that failure was not the end, it was just another lesson. Years passed, and the boy who once worked in grocery stores and washed dishes became a man standing in front of a mirror, wearing his first white coat. The day I put it on, I couldn't stop crying. My mother was there, weak but smiling proudly, tears streaming down her face. She whispered, "Now I can finally rest." That moment will stay with me forever. It wasn't just a coat. It was the proof that all the struggles, all the sleepless nights, all the pain had been worth it. During my residency, I faced real life and death situations for the first time. I held the hands of patients taking their last breaths. I comforted families who had just lost loved ones. I worked 36-hour shifts without rest, my body screaming for sleep, but my heart refusing to stop. Every patient I treated reminded me why I had chosen this path. I wasn't just healing bodies, I was giving hope. just like I once needed when I was a child. One night, after finishing a long shift, I walked into the hospital parking lot. The cold wind hit my face and I looked up at the sky. For the first time, I felt like I had finally made it. Not because I had money, not because I had success, but because I had kept my promise. My mother was living in a small but beautiful home I bought for her. She no longer had to work. She spent her days in peace, smiling every time she saw me in my white coat. That was the victory I had been fighting for all my life. But my story isn't just about becoming a doctor. It's about what life taught me along the way. I learned that no dream is too big if you are willing to sacrifice for it. I learned that pain can either break you or build you, and the choice is always yours. I learned that no matter how poor you are,